Welcome back to Time to Talk. I am your host, Faith.
And I'm your co-host, Grace.
Today is going to be all about movies, TV shows, and generally anything that we have been watching over the past weeks and months, and also just favorites that have been favorites for years.
General favorites, childhood favorites, you know, the movies that bring you back to your childhood and the nostalgic ones and anything in between, basically, yeah. So this will be fun.
Movies are fun. Films are fun for the most part.
They are fun.
Even the stupid ones are fun to a certain extent because then you just laugh at them.
They're fun if you get to make fun of them.
Right. It's not fun if you're with that person who actually enjoys the stupid movie.
Because then you just question their sanity.
And the movie, too.
Well, I mean, I always question the movie's actors and directors and everyone involved's sanity if it's a really bad movie.
Right, because you're just like, what were you thinking? You know, something like Baywatch. What were they thinking? That was basically just a movie to show off all of the actors' physical attributes. That's pretty much all that movie was for.
Oh, I was thinking even worse movie.
Which one?
I don't know if Baywatch would be considered like a B-rated movie. It may still make it up past that.
But here's the thing.
I was thinking all those B-rated movies.
But there's a difference between a B-rated movie and an A-rated movie that is really bad. Because the B-rated movie, it has that rating because we knew it wasn't going to be good to begin with. An A-rated movie that also flops, that's like, you had money, you had the budget, you had the actors.
Okay,
I mean, Baywatch has The Rock and Zac Efron, and it still flopped. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I see where you're going.
Like, there's zero excuse to make a poor movie when you have...
And yet, many of them do make horrible movies.
Yeah, which is why it's surprising when they actually have good ones, too. Anyway, so Grace, what are you currently watching?
So currently, I am not quite binge watching because I am pacing myself, although I'm watching probably more than I should at a time.
But who's judging?
Oh, no one. Maybe, hopefully. But I'm on The Mentalist, which
just pause for a minute and insert like all of the celebration sounds you possibly can because that show is
such a good show
to die for.
It's such a good show. See, I generally watch, like, I can't remember the last time I actually watched a TV show with anyone. Like, when we first started watching The Crown, we watched it together.
Same with
The Flash. But then, other than when we were a lot younger and watched, like, that Lego Ninja thing.
Oh, I forgot that thing existed.
I don't even remember what it's called.
Lego Ninja.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was called.
Something like that. But I can't really remember the last time I sat down and watched a TV show with someone else. And where I'm going with this is I was just going to say, it's funny because I know you love The Mentalist, our older sister and her husband love The Mentalist. We have got some really good friends.
But we've never watched it together.
No, and like all of us don't watch it together. And it's funny because I'm sitting there laughing at these. One, I was the last one to watch it, so it's okay that I'm watching it. But I was watching other things that were recommended to me. And again,
Good Place.
No, and again, I don't necessarily binge watch. I'm in between binge watching and like being a more
I feel like binge watching is considered a normal behavior right now.
I know.
So
I'm just trying to the alternative of watching like 1 or 2 episodes, or at least only 1 episode a night or something like that.
Okay.
So I'm in between there. So I get through them. I mean, I probably started a week and a half ago, and I'm on season 3 out of 7. Maybe 2 weeks ago.
I probably spent 1 week watching the first 3 seasons anyways.
Yeah, I started 2 weeks ago. So I slightly paced myself. But that's why I was behind. And I did have other show recommendations. But I'm glad I got there. And I love it. It's so good. And I love Jane.
Oh, Jane is just perfect.
I was told I actually wouldn't like it. Like, you said I probably wouldn't enjoy it very much.
I told you that you might not like it as much as you like to show like The Good Place.
Oh, see,
because it is more of the crime and darker side of shows versus something like The Good Place, which I haven't seen, but it sounds like The Good Place is more lighter humor.
No, The Good Place is definitely more but the thing is, I very much, when I'm watching something, I definitely tend to categorize things. So whether it's a book or a TV show or movies or anything, like, I don't even necessarily like judging a movie by how another movie, unless they're so closely related that it would make sense to do that. Same with books. So when it comes to TV shows, The Good Place, The Good Place is the only thing I know of that is like The Good Place, which already makes it really different and just its own thing. The Mentalist, the only thing I honestly have, because the only other crime-ish thing I've watched would be Psych,
which is terrible.
Well, no, Psych's actually really good.
No, it's not.
Yeah, have you actually watched all the seasons?
Yes, I have.
Okay, well, it's funny. It's a good show. It's not the best show.
It's funny in like the first season, and then it just goes downhill.
There are some.
The reason why I love The Mentalist and why I love Jane specifically is he's both smart, and the show is smart, and the people on there are smart, but yet there is the perfect blend of humor, which I feel is like me. You know, I'm smart, and the perfect blend of humor.
Again, so pretentious.
No, I'm not trying to be pretentious. I'm just saying I like my movies and shows that give you just enough to make you think, but they also make you laugh. Psych is just like over the top. You guys are acting stupid to solve crimes.
After The Mentalist.
Yes.
It started.
And supposedly I actually read an article the other day that Psych actually makes fun of The Mentalist.
Oh, they do.
Because Psych became a much bigger thing.
Well, yeah, I think it did. I mean, they have 8 seasons. But it also happened because it started airing before The Mentalist was over, I believe. Because, I mean, they made, like, that first movie in, like, 2017 or something. Like, the movie they made out of it.
Of Psych?
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was going to be 2 movies. There's one coming out this year or something.
There's another
next
one.
year.
But they had done Psych a movie in 2017, so it finished wrapping up. So it started airing shortly after The Mentalist, which is why I think it got so big, because as far as I know, The Mentalist was kind of the first of its kind in a way. I mean, like, you had NCIS and all of those shows.
Right. I think you probably had like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock, but you didn't have BBC Sherlock before.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a ton of other ones, like I think not Crime and Punishment, that's a book. Law and Order, but that's also not crime. That's from a lawyer perspective.
Again, those
Blue Bloods I think was started before The Mentalist.
But all of those, like The Mentalist and Psych, both revolve around this central character who is not psychic, but right.
Most of the rest of them are just normal police forces and detectives.
Air quotes around normal because.
Well, like the most extreme things they did were kind of go outside the lines of what is expected in law enforcement.
So they're for the most part normal teams of people versus focusing more on.
Right, they're just normal people who are doing their jobs really well.
Yeah.
Whereas Jane is a fake psychic.
Yeah. Well, both The Mentalist and Psych have focus on consultant detectives, basically. Yes. So they're in that same genre, but they do deviate from it. And I think The Mentalist was kind of the first one to do that, which is why when The Mentalist got so big, Psych is a good show, but it's the layman's version, let's say, of the two of them.
I just had a good comparison of why I do and don't like both of these shows. The Mentalist is like the TV show version of Lord Peter Wimsey, which are my favorite mystery novels ever. Psych is like the TV show version of an Agatha Christie murder mystery, which still good, but not the best.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree.
Okay, I've solved my conundrum.
Yes, okay. I totally agree. They're both good, but one is better.
One is noticeably
one is better. One has the best quips, comebacks.
It's just, like I said, the witticism in that TV show, along with just the beautiful characters, because I love the characters. That is one show, that I don't think there was one character in there who I absolutely hated, which is not normal. Typically, they're in a TV show, there is one person, obviously beyond the bad guy. But, like, even then, Red John, you don't necessarily hate him because you don't know who he is. Anyway.
No, I mean, I like The Mentalist because I think it also spent time on the other characters, which is something I really appreciated, was that not only was everyone likable and they had their place, but you also got to see them, like the one episode where Cho has to take care of the boy. I'm like, oh, it's so sweet.
It's so cute.
I love it so much. And I think it's it's that way with all of them. You know, the one where Rigsby is with his dad, has to go meet his dad. Like, all of them, they have their own. They obviously don't get quite as much time as Jane and probably, like, Jane and Lisbon together. But I think the key moments that they do choose to show really help the show, because it makes you invested not just in Jane and his journey, but in everyone's journey.
Right, and in some ways, the portrayal of the characters is more like a family dynamic versus Psych, where it's more focused on the romantic love story, complicated romantic feeling type of aspect between the characters.
Yeah, like, you like Lassie, you like Juliet, like, you like his dad and the, like, chief of police. They're all good characters, and there's not really anyone. There are a couple of characters that you kind of dislike because they're just so weird. But it is very different, because it's Gus and Sean and their crazy antics is what the show
Right, it's more
is
focused on
around.
Gus and Sean's escapades.
Yes.
Versus the actual solving crime part of it.
Yeah. So it's almost like Sean's and Jane's journeys are somewhat backwards, where Jane is like the showman, psychic person, and then stops and becomes a consultant detective. And Sean is like, becomes a consultant detective to become the ridiculous, over-the-top showman person who...
And just because he closes cases, people allow him to do that.
Exactly.
Which I don't like, because yes, there's a certain extent that people let Jane walk all over them in The Mentalist. But, like, at least he apologizes typically to the people. Like, he apologizes in his Jane way to the people he cares about, like Lisbon. So I can forgive his faults.
I mean, to some extent, they do it for the same reason of that they both know they are going to solve it, and they can do what they want to do.
Psych is always, it was just one of those shows where I felt like they purposely tried to make people uncomfortable and put them in awkward situations for the fun of it. Whereas Jane is, hey, do this thing for me, and I won't really tell you, and you might feel weird doing it or uncomfortable doing it, but it actually has a purpose. And for the most part, the person didn't make a complete fool of themselves.
Yeah. So basically, Psych was just the show you could laugh at, and it was fun. The Mentalist is one that you laugh at, but it's also full of a lot more wit, which makes it a little smarter.
Yes.
It's a little more highbrow.
Hence why I like it.
Yes. I love it.
The Mentalist is in that perfect position between a Sherlock and a Psych. And Sherlock is just unachievable genius who you love, especially the BBC, because who does not love Benedict Cumberbatch? Did I say that correctly? Cumberbatch, okay. Who does not love...
It's Benedict Cucumber. That's what our family just calls it.
I like to try to say his last name correctly, and I always second guess myself when I get to the end of it.
It's Cumberbatch.
Who doesn't love Benedict Cumberbatch as an actor in general, because he's fantastic, but in Sherlock, it's just... It's perfect, and so I loved that show so much, but I actually tried to go back and start rewatching it recently, and I couldn't. And I probably just wasn't in the right mindset, but it's one where it's harder to get back in. I think I would like it more if I were watching it with someone else.
That show is paced very oddly at times, and it's the only thing I can think of that would maybe have similar how the story and like how basically I don't know, like I'm trying to think. It has a very specific way. So like The Mentalist, when you're watching it, yes, it jumps between scenes, but there's never a like rapidly progressing through time shown, if that makes sense. Like there's never really a montage. True. It's always a like one-time speed normal scene. And similarly with Psych too, is that there's never that kind of montage type thing. Whereas Sherlock has a very odd way, not only of how it's shot and just how the screen looks in some of those shots, but it also has very odd angles at which it shoots kind of those montage scenes. A lot of it fits with the music that they have.
And just Sherlock as a character.
Yeah, and Sherlock as a character, because I almost feel like the way they shot it was an attempt to replicate what goes on in Sherlock's mind.
Oh, for sure. Because that was definitely their take on Sherlock Holmes that was different than the traditional Sherlock Holmes
Mm-hmm.
is that it was more of, he was almost a mental, he was mental. And I use that broad term because I don't want to say like he suffered from a specific mental disorder or anything, but it was just that their take was he was just more mental and like had, I don't want to use the word issues, but he had a more obsessive personality. And even the fact that they made him have that nicotine addiction, which isn't a typical, I don't believe it's in the traditional, in the Arthur Conan Doyle.
In the original ones,
In the original
I know
ones,
he smoked a pipe, but I don't know if the whole,
But that
like,
was,
him
like,
being a
typical
drug
British.
addict.
yeah, I think in the original ones, which I read a lot of them, I read the ones I could get my hands on. And in the
Yeah.
original ones, it was more just that he was a really cold person and
Yeah.
didn't express feelings for anything. And he was just really analytical.
So-
But beyond that, I mean, people didn't really hate him, or he wasn't eccentric or anything. He was just really methodical and
Yeah.
cold.
He was very much more like a scientist, almost.
Yeah,
like
that's a good
in
description
his
of
craft
him.
versus, I've never seen the Robert Downey Jr. ones, and then I don't
No.
know if there are other ones that exist. Not that I know
I
of.
don't know.
But I feel the changes they made to the character of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson in the BBC version, one, it kind of modernized it,
Oh, for
which
sure,
was
definitely.
nice. But two, I think it definitely made both of them a lot more relatable and more
Oh,
human,
yes.
because now you're dealing with, not, he is still an intellectual genius and completely brilliant, but it, like, the interactions between him and Mycroft, who's very similar, it's basically like you can tell he's struggling with his own inner demons, essentially. Which
Oh,
makes,
yeah.
which makes him incredibly human, because it's not, like, yes, there are times that he does it and he enjoys it because it kind of shows off how smart he is, but I think at the end of the day, it's because he's driven by this, it's almost this thing of, like, if he has a gift, he has to use it somehow. And for him,
I don't even know if that's how he thinks of it. It's more of like he can do this thing, and so he's compelled to do this thing.
yeah.
Like, in certain ways, you know, he is kind of like a, haha, solve the crime, and you guys couldn't do it.
Uh-huh.
But in many ways, it's more just like a, I know the answer, so, like, I just have to get to the answer. Or I don't know the answer, and I have to get to the answer. Like, it's a desire to...
His world revolves around solving puzzles. And, like,
Yeah.
if you were to take that away from him, he would go insane, basically.
Well, which he kind of does.
Yeah, because there's several interactions between him and Mycroft. But there's one in particular where he's, like, holds up this hat or something. And he's like, tell me about it, right, basically? Or make your deductions. And Mycroft does it. And then, you know, he basically surpasses him. And what actually happens.
Sherlock?
Yes. And he makes the comment, like, you're losing your touch. And he does that a lot with Mycroft in just his quips to him. And it is very much...
It's an all-consuming passion for Sherlock
Yeah.
to find the answers to things, whatever they are,
Yeah.
to the point where he doesn't realize that not everybody else in the world has that same
Yeah.
overwhelming passion and compulsion to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Hence why he gets frustrated when other people don't just follow along and do what he says in order to reach the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't see him in his pursuit of solving the puzzle, the crime, as getting in other people's way. Because he doesn't even consider other people.
I definitely did like the BBC one because not only his struggles, but then his relationship with John, and then John and Mary. Like, he's so much more human, and it makes it...
Oh, yes, there's definitely a character progression
He's-
from
he's-
the first episode to the last.
He's still as much Sherlock Holmes as possible, but I think they did really, really well keeping the integrity of the character while also making him someone different and someone even more relatable, I think, than the original one.
Which just shows off by how popular that show is, too, and
But
how
yeah.
much people love
Yes.
the
Yes.
characters.
Yes. Although maybe some of them just watch it because it's Benedict Cumberbatch. I don't know.
True. I will fully admit that's kind of why
Oh
I
my
started
gosh.
watching them, because I knew who the actor was.
Yeah, yes. I knew who
But
both
that's
of
why
them
I
were.
watch a lot of things, because
was
you
gonna
know
say.
who the actors are, and you like those actors, so you watch their films, and then you're like, oh, this is really good. Hence why I made that comment way back at the beginning of this episode that when you know the actor and then the movie sucks, you're just like, really?
Mhm.
Really?
Yes.
I'm disappointed in you.
Yes. But no, I think again, of the three of them, the only ones that I really could even slightly compare to each other would be The Mentalist and Psych.
Yeah.
And it would be The Mentalist is better.
Oh, for sure.
But Sherlock Holmes is just Sherlock Holmes. Nobody compares to Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yes. Okay, so we have now spent this entire episode talking about The Mentalist
and how maybe
and everything instead of actually talking about everything that we've been watching. So,
everything. Well, what have you been watching?
well, I just finished the 2 seasons of Jack Ryan. Because it's a show that when I was watching The Mentalist, I was talking with Dad about, and he said that I might like Jack Ryan because it's also on that more action adventure, crime solving type of genre. Because it's John Krasinski who plays a CIA agent.
Okay.
And the first season takes place in the Middle East and Yemen, and then the second one is in Venezuela with the upcoming election between President Reyes and this other girl in the TV show. And I enjoyed them. I mean, I enjoyed them to the point where I finished both seasons in about a week. They're also shorter. There's like 8 episodes per season versus 15 or 23 that there are in The Mentalist.
Yeah.
So it's a much more manageable load.
16 combined.
Yeah. But I mean, they're like 40 minutes each too. So it's not
their typical TV show
though.
length.
I'm going to say 2 weeks. A week and a half. 2 weeks. Because 16 episodes, 40 minutes each is still a very long time for only 1 week. And I didn't feel like I was watching it that quickly. Anyway. So, yeah, it was enjoyable. Definitely not my preferred cup of tea. So I wouldn't necessarily watch them again. But they were better than watching something like Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, I started watching that. I don't even think I made it past the first season. Which is weird.
They just get too repetitive.
Yeah, you told me I would probably like it, but I'll be honest and say the characters were so flat.
Well, I told you that here's the thing. I got to a point where I was literally just watching it to have something to watch, but I would fast forward to only get to the scenes with the characters I actually liked. Because you could pretty much fill in all the rest without watching anything.
Yeah, I ended up skipping a lot of parts of it, and I still don't think. I maybe made it through the second season. I can't remember. It was funny, but yeah, it was not. I'm like, there are 7 seasons of this. I don't.
Right, and you know that the story endings you want to happen won't happen until the 7th season. And in between, there's all this, like, I like this guy, and then this, like, terrible interaction, and you break up with him.
I know, I was
or,
going to say, I'm like,
a stupid mistake
because
you're getting back to the other guy. And you're
7
just like,
seasons
seriously?
of a slightly diluted Hallmark film, because I'm like,
well,
from the very beginning, you know the inevitable conclusion of Lorelai and Luke is his name, and you're like, you guys just please.
But I still don't think
season
they
1
they don't get together till the very end of like the last season, which is why I'm saying in between it's basically like high school for adults.
Exactly.
Is what it feels like.
I'm like, I should just watch the 7th season apparently, because then maybe things will actually happen in that one. But I stopped watching that, not because it was a decent show, but
I'm sure were I growing up during the time it was originally airing, I would have liked it.
Let's be honest. Gilmore Girls is probably one of those ones in the genre of like Friends or
it is
all of those.
Well,
ones
more like Golden Girls.
Yeah,
where people who love them grew up watching them.
Yeah, and it's okay for them to be repetitive.
Yeah,
because at the time people were generally watching it like once a week when the episode came out versus binge watching it, right? Mm-hmm. And it definitely was a lot more of a cultural thing.
It was a community building versus you just watch your own shows now.
Yeah, and like Gilmore Girls is not a show to binge watch, at least in my opinion. If you really like it, maybe, but
yeah, by binge watch we mean basically you watch 5 episodes, but it's only the length of 1 episode because you're fast forwarding so many parts of it. Yeah. So, because we're done with the Gilmore Girls, let's go to things that we do like, and let's talk about feature-length films we've been watching recently.
Okay.
One of the ones that I just saw is called The Aeronauts. It's a mixture of true stories that took place during the mid-1800s in England and Great Britain with a meteorologist who went up in hot air balloon trips and broke like a ton of records on height and everything, but it was so that he could understand the layers of the atmosphere and be better able to predict weather. So it stars Eddie Redmayne and Felicity Jones. pretty much the entire film is them in this hot air balloon on there was this one trip that the original English meteorologist took where they got up to 37,000 feet, which is the highest anyone had been to that point.
Wow.
Yeah. That's kind of the one experiment that this Aeronauts movie is based around, and that's what happens in the present day timeline, but then it cuts between flashbacks of Felicity Jones's early life and her story, and then Eddie's early life, and I'm using their names because
You can't remember their actual names in the movie?
well, it's Glacier is his name, and her name is Wren.
Interesting names.
Well, those are their last names.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense.
It's James Glacier, and it starts with an A, and I'm blanking out on it.
Okay, well, that's okay. You can, if you...
But anyway, so follows Glacier's early life and Wren's early life, and then how they meet and how they even got together, and they're doing this together. It's cool because it's more action adventure in a way, but it's set in a historical period.
Is this film on your list of favorites, or did it not quite make it up there?
It's just different. It's unlike anything I've ever seen because it's a really good look at character just because of the fact that they're trapped in this basket together and it's just the two of them.
It reminds me of like 12 Angry Men.
But yeah, it has that. It's only you as the viewer and them in this basket together for many, many minutes of the movie. And so it's a really good character film, but it also is this more adventure suspense. Not suspense in the mystery, like Hitchcock form of the suspense word.
No, but
suspense in that, will they survive, or something like that. So I found it very fascinating, and I would definitely watch it again. You would like it, and I would like to watch it with you.
Okay.
For sure.
I was just recommended another one the other day called Instant Family.
Huh.
Which, the brief description was it's about a family who adopts a few kids from foster care. It's supposedly on Amazon Prime, so I'm hoping we can watch it together because it was highly recommended.
Is it a newer film?
I don't know. I've never heard of it before.
Well, here's the truth so I've only started watching things on Amazon Prime. At first, when quarantine happened and everything, I was watching Disney Plus. Disney Plus just doesn't have options.
Oh, can we just say I know. Well, yeah, Disney Plus is a whole other story of how frustrating it is at times.
And that they don't have the things that you do want them to have, and they do have things that you're like, I've never even heard about this. Didn't even know Disney made this.
The only good thing about it is that I was able to watch
Marvel, pretty much.
Yeah, a few more Marvel ones that I haven't been able to watch before.
Yeah. I watched Marvel and National Geographic on it.
Yeah, I didn't even watch
That's
National
all I watched.
Geographic.
Well, I did watch National Geographic. And now
Dad and I attempted to watch the 5 Pirates of the Caribbean, but of course they took the 4th one off, so you're like, what? And you cannot get it anywhere, literally.
Yeah.
It doesn't stream anywhere else.
The first 3.
I don't honestly care. I mean, except for the fact that the 3rd ends on like a really weird note. So you're like, what happens? But I also don't really care enough about it.
They all kind of matter. Weird note.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's be honest. Anyway, so I started watching Disney Plus and Netflix shows, and then I remembered, we have Amazon Prime. I should go there. And I started there because that's where The Mentalist is.
Well, but now we have found probably my 2 favorite shows of the year.
Is The Good Place on Amazon Prime too?
No.
Is that way? What were you gonna say?
I mean, okay. My 3 favorite shows, because I'm not counting The Flash because I still love it, but it's also been running for a while, so it's not of this year. It would be The Mentalist, The Night Manager, and The Good Place are my 3 favorite.
The Night Manager, I believe, is one of the first ones I started watching because a coworker watched it and recommended it to our team.
Oh, it's so good.
And I watched it, and it was good. It's definitely one that I wouldn't watch again by myself. I would only watch it with other people because I didn't love it enough to spend my own time on it again. Then again, it's also one of those that I feel like I would be really uncomfortable watching with other people at some point.
I would probably rewatch it by myself, but it's not a show that I'm going to watch over and over and over again, right?
See,
it was very, very good, and I loved it, and I still love it. But it's
The Night Manager is almost, it was very heavy And it was also one of those where I say I would watch it with someone else who hadn't seen it, mostly because it's one of those shows where you want to turn to the other person and say, okay, what do you think is going to happen next? Because you know, but they don't. Like Jack Ryan or The Night Manager, those types of crime type of shows, they're to a point where you just want someone else to work with you to try to solve what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
again,
that's
maybe
something
it's just
that
me.
You do more than I would.
It's totally what I do.
But I also, I mean, I can see that. It's weird because it's like now that we have the opportunity to binge watch things, I know so few people who actually, unless it's like with their husband or, you know, their significant other, I know so few people who actually watch a show with someone else.
Oh, I know.
It's more binge watching.
TV shows are definitely one of those things where people have their own selections. Just like with music, you know, they have their own playlist. Well, they have their own TV show.
I'm just kind of honestly trying to wrap my head around watching those kinds of shows that I have watched just by myself with another person. And again, it is weird because it's like the six of us all watched The Mentalist. We just all watched it, except for Paige and Timothy. We all watched it separately. It's similarly with those of us who watched The Good Place. We all watched it separately. And it's like we've watched them and we talk about them and we all love them. It's just
we've never seen a single episode together.
Yeah,
or even clips together.
Like, I would love to watch The Good Place with them. I think that would, in terms of comfort level.
Watch it with me because I've never seen it.
Gosh. It's, yes. I guess we do need to watch it. Or at least, yes, I will watch a few episodes with you if you want to binge watch things on your own.
Because that might be a show that, at least my initial reaction going in is I won't like it unless someone else who really loves it watches it with me, and so I kind of feed off of their enthusiasm for the show.
You just need to give it a chance.
But the only show that I've watched with other people recently is we started watching Agent Carter as a family. But even then, I think we made it through maybe the episode 6 of the first season, and then I pretty much watched the rest of it by myself. I still have not finished the finale of season 2. Yeah. Like, and again, I don't think I will. Yeah. I'm just not invested.
We started watching The Crown together, but then when the 3rd season came out...
Right, because we were waiting. We were watching it as it was filming, so we had that long pause before the 3rd season came out, and then I never watched it.
And then I saw the first 3 episodes of it. And that one is one I didn't watch it by myself. One, it's a historical TV show, but 2, it's also just heavy.
So we should go. Okay, so we need to watch The Good Place together, and we need to watch the 3rd season of The Crown together
because it is still a very good show. But it is
and I want to watch it.
It's like, you know, it's one of those where it's like it's kind of like Dunkirk or The King's Speech. Or
you just need someone's hand to hold while you're watching it.
Well, or it's almost like just having another person there, you're able to feed off their energy of being there, right? So like you both can make it through collectively, and you don't necessarily have to hold hands or talk to each other at all.
Exactly, like our experience with watching Schindler's List.
Yes.
Where you just need someone else there, not to say anything to each other, but just because there are so many moments in the movie that you're either in full panic mode or you're just extremely depressed by what just happened. Yes. And you just need someone else there to be like, I feel ya.
Yes. I watched another Holocaust film called The Pianist on Netflix.
You did watch it.
I've seen The Pianist.
I saw it and I haven't watched it yet.
It's so good. I've seen The Pianist, I've seen The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and then there's a third one about a woman magician that I've seen. And the thing is, The Pianist, I think it may be 2 hours. Like it's shorter than Schindler's List, but it's not significantly shorter. So it's weird that I could watch that one by myself.
But how much of it takes place in an actual concentration camp?
Probably 2/3 of them. Well, okay. It's kind of split up into thirds almost, where the first third is them. It's like the beginning, and then they come, and it's like everyone in the ghetto. Like, so things still happen, and it's still really bad. But
it's not. It's the beginning as much on all the death and dying.
No,
right?
it's not like Schindler's List where
every other scene someone's getting their head blown off or they're burning in a gas
that doesn't happen
chamber
until slightly later, and even then it's not as often.
Yeah.
Because you're still following the central character who does happen to be a Jew, but it's his experience of the war, and he actually gets separated from the rest of his family who goes to a concentration camp.
And they all die,
and he's stuck,
right?
No.
I thought they did. For some reason, I feel like reading the description of the film, for some reason, it was like, this person is the only survivor of his family.
I can remember
Because
the
it's
very
based
ending
on, it's a
scene.
true story.
No,
isn't
it is. It's a true story. And now I'm thinking, I think his family does die. Because in the last scenes, I don't remember his family.
I'm pretty sure that that's what the description says, is he's the sole survivor of his family because he got separated.
Yeah. So that's what I'm like. So it's different, and it's still really heavy and it's dark, but it's not like Schindler's List because he goes and he's kind of rescued basically from being put on the cattle train, and he goes instead to a labor camp. So things still happen and it's still really awful, but you don't see the gas chambers and the concentration camps and stuff like that. You see his experience, and he escapes. And so, I mean, it's his journey, which it's still horrible, but it's not as gruesome as some of the other ones I've seen. So I definitely, since you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. It is so good.
But I want to start watching movies together again, is the thing.
I know. I will watch it again.
Because I also, it's interesting that you've watched the more war Holocaust ones. I've watched 2. One was a lawyer film. The other was another CIA film, and it was called The Report, which highly, highly recommend.
The Report or The Minority Report?
The Report.
Okay.
What is The Minority Report?
It's some Tom Cruise movie that I started watching that I stopped immediately watching because it's so weird.
I don't think I'm ever going to watch a Tom Cruise film.
I've seen a few. One of them being Jerry Maguire, which is actually decent-ish.
I've never seen it. All I know is the scene of "Show me the money." That is literally the only thing I know.
You have to watch the movie because it makes that phrase so significantly better, and people take it out of context all the time.
Well, I know they do, but here's the thing. They don't take it out of context because they've seen it. So like us, when we quote movies, they're not out of context because we can fully appreciate the context in which the phrase was originally said. But if you are only the recipient of the phrase and you haven't seen the film,
yes,
then it feels out of context. Okay, so I need to watch that. But The Report is the one with Adam Driver, who plays Kylo Ren.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And it's all about the CIA interrogation program that they ran for 9/11 to capture the terrorists, which ended up being extremely unsuccessful.
So is it a good movie?
It is a fantastic movie.
Okay.
It's very slow-paced in one sense because it is just following this character whose name is Daniel Jones and the report that he is writing on the CIA.
Oh, this is the one that the whole Bible the report thing.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
And they're like, your report is over 7,000 pages long. How are you going to expect people to read it when the Bible tells the whole story of human history in a fraction of that?
Yes.
Which was a beautiful comment. It was a beautiful comment and so spot on. Anyway, yes, I highly recommend it because it is also one that I would want to watch it with other people too, because it's one that you could have discussions on. What do you do with that type of information? Because that's another part of this whole thing is the report is always so close to being published. So close. And yet it's not. Yeah. And it gets close again. Well, and it's this whole idea of, does the public deserve to know this information? I mean, does it deserve to be classified? What does it mean to be classified?
Yeah, that's what.
Who do you actually have to protect?
The one we watched, it's not the mailroom. Is it?
No, the newsroom.
Yes, right, or something like that. The one with Tom Hanks.
Yes, the newsroom.
Meryl Streep that we watched, that was similar, but it was them publishing like all those classified documents on Vietnam, basically. Right. And that one, and I feel like we've watched some other ones that are kind of similar, and just they.
It's about that fine line between what does the American public deserve to know, and what is better because it will actually protect the American public not to know.
It's basically it's this whole thing of, it's a different take on the whole idea of privacy versus security.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, you could do it from an individual citizen's perspective of what does a citizen deserve to keep private versus what do they have to give, what rights-ish do they have to give up a little bit of in order for the entire public to be safe. But it's from almost a government.
It's from a government perspective.
Yeah, it's a government's perspective. What does the government, quote unquote, have a right to keep private from the public?
Which is exactly why the report is interesting, because when it's a private sector film like the newsroom, where it's citizens as a citizen myself, I feel like I can empathize with them more and root for them more to
Well, and
publish it, even if they're doing it quote unquote illegally.
Yeah, but in some ways, you also, like, those films, I feel, are set up as a, not quite the government's bad, but it is kind of a, the government's keeping secrets that it shouldn't be keeping.
Yeah, it's definitely more a celebration, and it's pro get the information out there and free speech, which by no means am I against. But all I'm saying is the report is interesting because it is obviously a historical event. This happened. And during the time that this report was being written, Edward Snowden happened. And that plays into the film. And there's this conversation that Dan Jones has with somebody else in it where the question is, do you want to be a Snowden? Like, what's more valuable? Informing the American public, even if they call you a traitor, or trying to go through the actual correct means of getting this report published and knowing that it might never happen and that all of your work could be for naught and everybody who participated in these gruesome acts is never prosecuted for anything that they did.
Those conversations are so tricky because it is, like, how do you find that balance between what needs to be published
I actually
and
had
what
this
doesn't? Because in some regards, it's so different when when you think of something like Nazi Germany and all of the trials that happened afterwards, because, if you think about it, if they would have won, it would have been, you wouldn't have known half the things that actually happened.
And it's the comment that, who was I talking with? Possibly Tyler, where we were discussing how history is written by the victors. So we won't ever know differently. Actually, I think it was Caleb, because I was talking about the comment made in We Were Soldiers at the end by the Vietnam general who's like, oh, now this is going to be an American war, and we all know where that leads. Yes. America's going to do everything that they possibly can to win the war.
Again, war movies are another interesting topic. Yeah. Depending on
but the whole principle that you only ever know your history based on who wrote the history book, and that's obviously going to be on the whatever side won. And it's also going to be dependent on your country. I mean, we live in America, hence more than likely America is going to get the best name in any history book you read.
I think I have some issues with that because I understand it as a concept, because if you look at the grand scheme of an actual events and how the world was shaped, yes, it is so very much shaped by victors. But if you're talking about actual history being written, I don't really think that's quite true all the time, because it's not always written by the victors, if that makes sense.
Like history being written in the sense of history being made?
No. History in the sense of history being made, I would say yes. Like, the world being shaped by the victors is very true.
Oh, like, my point is not that you can't find history that was written by the non-victors.
Yes, no, and that's
but more of the mainstream history you're going to be taught in your education is going to be from our perspective of who was on top.
Yeah. So my point is, if you dug deep enough, you could find opposing sides.
And basically the losing side. But the thing is, it's on you to dive deeper. But otherwise, you're only going to get what's presented to you.
I think the least controversial way, I like taking the phrase, and my guess is the way it was originally meant, is just the whole idea of that history as a thing in and of itself, not written down, is shaped by the victors.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So civilizations rise and fall, and the ones that are victorious are the ones that then shape the world, right? Like, the only reason Rome had such an impact was because it was a victor in that. Yeah. And then Rome falls, right? And so in that sense, like, history is shaped by the victors because...
Yes, and the comment, too, of that, like I'm saying, there's only so much you can put in a history textbook. Yeah. There's only so much you can teach. Hence, you're going to highlight the major points, which is typically going to be following the lines of whatever country empire was ruling, whoever the victors were. I mean, you can't get the full story. Like I just said, it's going to be on you as an individual to find those stories. Hence why I appreciate these films, too, that take a different perspective or find a story that wasn't told or tell the same story from the different perspective.
So... Did I interrupt you, or can I?
You can totally change the conversation.
No, I'm not. I'm not changing the conversation. It's on this topic because I brought it up because I just made the comment war movies are an interesting genre to talk about.
Oh goodness, we're gonna talk about war movies.
I mean, we don't even necessarily have to talk about any of graphics. I don't know, but it was something I noticed. I didn't notice it the first time we watched Hacksaw Ridge, but I noticed it more the second time, and then I especially noticed it in the We Were Soldiers film that we just watched, how the enemy is portrayed.
Tell me more.
Meaning, one, they are kind of dehumanized. Like, the enemy they aren't people. And I noticed this because you're watching these graphic battle scenes, right? And the entire time you're sitting there and you're rooting for the American soldiers in both of these films to win and survive. And it doesn't really matter how many of the enemy side
They can
dies,
annihilate a whole
like the
army.
one scene where the two guys, or the three guys at the time, 3 or 4 guys, is 4 guys, right, in the bank who get lost, right?
You mean the whole platoon, the American platoon that gets lost,
and then it's only the 4 who come back, but it's the 4 in there at night. And that whole scene happens, and you're sitting there, and your only desire is that those 4 guys survive, right? Your thought isn't, I hope nobody gets hurt on either side. It's I just want these 4 people to survive. Like, literally, as soon as that happened, I was sitting there for almost the entire rest of the movie just saying, if these 4 guys do not make it back, I hate this film. Because I literally was just like, the only thing I was rooting for at this point in time, because everybody else was dying, was just that these 4 guys make it back. But kind of the same thing, Hacksaw Ridge was slightly different because you get it from the perspective of
a pacifist.
Who helps both sides.
Correct.
So in some ways, he brings kind of a redeeming influence in that you see the humanity of both sides, whereas We Were Soldiers is very much, you do kind of get to see, and especially at the end, you get to see the humanity of the losing side, but it's so much more focused on the interactions between the American soldiers and their survival.
So I'm going to make a politically charged statement. Not that it's inherently political, but the reason is, I think, we do not get films. I believe they exist, but we do not get to see films that portray World War II from the Nazi side or the Japanese side. We don't get films that portray the communist side of Russia. Regardless of whether or not those are celebrations of those things or just pure informational, like, here's why this Nazi soldier was brainwashed into dying for this regime. Regardless of the portrayal, whether it's a celebration or just an informational and here's why, and like have empathy for them, I don't think we get those because it's politically incorrect. I think there is a level of censorship that goes on that you wouldn't, like, nowadays, here's the thing, not just because of Black Lives Matter and everything, which I don't want to talk about that right now, I don't really want to say anything, but not just because of that movement, but just in general, like, I don't think we would ever have a film on, here's what actually happened on the Confederate side.
And that's where it's frustrating, because it is very much like the victors write the history. And part of it is, I think it was Caleb again who made the comment after we watched that movie, because as the credits were scrolling, I saw something about, like, the Department of Defense and a few others, and I made a comment. I was like, that's interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen that in a film. And Caleb he said, yeah, some films actually get money if they choose to portray the war in such a light that makes basically the U.S. look better. I'm not saying that was true of We Were Soldiers, or if it's necessarily true in general, although I can kind of see that. So it makes sense, but I think, one, just me, you know me, I want to know everyone's stories on both sides. So it's something that I notice a lot more, particularly in war films, where if they do, I very much appreciate the moment that they choose to make the enemy human. Like War Horse. War Horse 1 is already very different because you're following a horse versus a character.
People, yeah.
But even then, you're still rooting for the Allied forces, right? Against Germany and their forces. But the one scene on No Man's Land where they go and they cut Joey out, right? And that interchange between the German soldier and the British soldier. It's so sweet because it's like they're both human, right? They're both just boys, basically, right? Having this interaction, saving an animal, and they just kind of joke about it.
While the comment I made earlier about the level of censorship in the types of films that we'd see, I believe that is true. It makes me sad that that's the reality, because I think what people lose sight of so much is that most of the time, soldiers didn't become soldiers because they wanted to. Most of the time, they were forced to, whether it was like an enlistment thing, you know, you had to, not an enlistment, a draft, Or, like, Germany, where I don't know if they had a draft, but it was more just like, hey, Hitler decided to attack, so everybody, I guess it would be a draft, right? You had to enlist.
It is also this thing of, you know, we see it so much in general society today, this taking sides and basically, whether, you know, you may not have physical arms and weapons.
It's a pressure that you have to support something. That pacifism and sitting on the fence is seen as weak.
Yeah.
And indecisive.
You have to be engaged in the war that's going on, and there's probably multiple ones, I would at least say, of different battles, and some of them line up on sides.
People think that, you know, if you are in the Nazi army, that means you are a Nazi and you want to kill all Jews and all other races. And that's not necessarily true. Maybe you're just doing it because that's the only way that you know your family is going to be protected and that they won't kill your family. Like, there are very human reasons for why you would do things that you disagree with.
And in our conversation yesterday, Jackson brought up Nate Saint again and that whole story. And just kind of how their society functioned and why the guys got killed in the first place. And we were talking about how if you kind of look at all of the civilizations throughout history, almost all of them are based on some type of honor-shame code at like the primal basis. So if you look at what patriotism even means, and you just think about it from that human perspective of if you were in World War II and if you were even disabled and that's why you couldn't fight, the amount of shame that you got from your community about that was ridiculous. Similarly, like if you were just of Japanese descent in America, right, and had nothing to do with it, you get people, especially in wartime, I think, we want things to be black and white. And so I think a lot of war films, there are some that do it very well and try and present more of a grayness to it. But I think whenever there's such a conflict of that magnitude, in order to tell a really good story in an hour and a half, there has to be some amount of black and whiteness to it, where there is a very clear protagonist and very clear antagonist, so that at the end of the day, the audience isn't left like, well, that was just stupid, why did that war even happen, what, you know?
Especially if you're just doing it for box office money.
So that's something that I think, which is why when people talk about Afghanistan or Iraq and things like that, they often tend to be so difficult and very heated conversations, is because unlike World War II or World War I,
there was no clear
There is
enemy.
no clear...
I mean, beyond terrorists and ISIS.
Yeah. But even then, it's like both sides commit egregious crimes, basically.
Yeah.
And they just do things they shouldn't do. Not saying that the Allied forces were perfect in World War II, but even then, it was a very clear distinction between a regime that was set... Like, the principles were wrong. They were fundamentally wrong.
Though, I mean, the hours and hours long debates that you could have about whether or not America was correct in setting an atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
No, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying.
You can't.
What the Japanese did in the South Pacific was horrible. What the Nazi regime was doing, but again, you could say Allied forces shouldn't have had Russia involved. Like, that was wrong because Russia was communist and that was blah, blah. You could also argue things about the atomic bomb, right? So neither side was perfect. But even then, I think there's still this, it's a little gray, but there's still a more black and whiteness to it that I think.
And I think to a certain extent,
it also had a very clear start and end date.
Yes.
Right? Versus something like basically all the conflicts happening in the Middle East, Africa, like all of them.
Well, even Korea and Vietnam.
Yeah, it's just...
You know, after World War II, it's just conflicts ended being dragged out. And part of it is just the advance of war technology, and that basically was a standstill, hence the Cold War, where no one won that because it just came to a point where, okay, we're not going to set off our nuclear missiles. You don't set off the nuclear missiles. We just mutually understand that we could destroy each other that way and basically destroy the whole rest of the world. So let's just not do that. And it was more... we'll make this tenuous peace until World War III comes around. But what I was going to say when I was, interrupted you earlier, is we, as viewers of past events, will always make judgments. And it's just human nature to, whether it's a present event that's happening or a past one, we will always make judgments about things. even when we don't have all the pieces. And like you were saying too, just about we will never know what would have happened if Nazi Germany had won World War II. You know, you will never know what would have happened had we not set the atomic bombs off. Like, maybe the war would have dragged on for another 5 years.
Yep.
And in the grand scheme of things, destroy this city or kill another 50 million men in 5 years.
You could have this conversation about what was the best possible, most humane course of action.
And the problem is with war is it very much falls into this, like, it's a pragmatic, greater good argument.
War isn't humane on either side.
No.
So at the end of the day, it is about making what is the decision that you can make that at the end of the day is going to save the most amount of lives.
And in the grander scheme also be better for the world as a whole. Because again, it's not black and white, but in a sense it was a battle between freedom and tyranny.
I mean, that's what,
and we all know that freedom needs to win over tyranny.
Yes, definitely. And it was funny, not funny though, but that's not the word I want, but you know, you made the comment that you and Caleb had a conversation about what the Vietnamese leader said at the end of the film. I was struck by a comment that Mel Gibson's character made towards the beginning when they were first telling him to basically go find them and start that battle. He made the comment, he's like, yeah, our enemy ran away, they didn't kill anyone, and of course we're gonna go chase him down. It struck me as...
That's such a bully mentality.
No, that's what I was thinking. I was like, as much as this film, you root for the Americans to win because you know those characters. It also, in key moments, very much highlighted this... It's this bully mentality that I think...
Like, you mess with America, we're going to crush you regardless of what you did to us.
It was that's really sad and also funny in a sad way that we
have to be on top.
The first Vietnam War that ended horribly. Like, we won, but at the cost of how many lives?
We won in air quotes because, again, it was not a decisive victory.
No, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't. And so many people died. And it all started because we had to basically instigate something. Like, it wasn't okay. Like, you know,
Which part of it was just due to America's political position at the time, which was we are fighters for freedom and democracy around the world, and if you threaten that, we're going to become involved.
I guess those things also stand out to me because you and I have had conversations basically about cultures in general and this whole idea of imperialism, nationalism, somewhat
individualism,
and
all
white
of those
supremacism,
isms.
Basically all of these ideas of like
your country being the best, your race being the
country
best, your people being the best.
Yeah, and just how those, in some regards, I would say that the American government, as it was originally established to be, probably was one of the best ones that has existed
in
and
principle,
will
yes,
ever exist. In principle, like there are some definitive things you can say that make a certain civilizations better than another. Like there's a reason that we have a Western civilization that descends from the laws of the Romans, right? Like a government system, like those things, and that's in essence, I think, what progress originally means, right? It's actually those good, positive things that then you build upon. But at the end of the day, those aren't things that your culture can own for itself, if that makes sense. And so it's, I don't know, I guess those things just stand out to me because I'm always so sensitive to those somewhat...
They're biased, but they're biased storylines.
Well, yeah, it's the demarcations between both individuals and then society, like countries, and then cultures that I think, especially now with things that are going on, I've always been sensitive to them, but I think even especially now, I'm more sensitive to just the ways that we separate versus come together.
Oh, this is okay. So talking about current events without specifics, this is all I do want to say. And I think it's the most important thing, and it's what I believe. And I will fully admit I'm doing some of my own soul searching and whether or not I, on one hand, like, will take racism and like whether or not I am not, what I even know, because I don't know much. But anyway, that aside, what I believe at the end of the day is we are all human. And it is crazy, but we live in a world that is the most connected ever. And yet, the amount of conflict and division that is happening is astronomical.
Yeah, we live in a complete paradox where, on one hand, our world is so global.
And yet, it's like, because of the very fact that we have the ability to connect with someone who lives on the other side of the globe is also the very reason why we instigate a conflict with that person who is on the other side of the globe. Yeah, like, instead of using these tools for good, which, granted, there are so many people who do, so many organizations who do.
Yes.
But the way the world works is the negative things always have a tendency to blow up and become a lot bigger and overshadow all of the good things that are happening. And so it just very much... Because people, I mean, that's also just human. Being broken people, we will succumb to fear and anxiety and conflict and anger much more quickly than we will acknowledge the good and be joyful. Anyway, my point being that we've grown up in a world that it's just separation and division from everything, from the tiniest thing, like... And I don't want to demean it by saying the tiniest thing, but something that cannot be changed, like skin color, to the large worldwide political schemes, political regime differences, and those types of things that actually instigate these huge conflicts that affect millions and billions of people. Like, everything on that scale, we find reasons to hate each other.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw in there, we could have an entire different conversation on the whole phrase of it could fall into the wrong hands.
Oh my goodness.
Of when you're talking about arms or technology or anything like that, or knowledge and information. We could have a whole nother conversation on just that phrase alone of it could fall into the wrong hands. So we'll say that.
And you can also have an entire conversation on just morality and the idea of pragmatism and greater good, because that is so much of why reasons are justified
that conversation
nowadays.
Can lead into what progress means and all of that. So we'll table that.
And we will totally derailed from what we're watching.
I know. We will table that conversation. I don't know if you want to come back to maybe just list off some of our favorite films.
Yeah, let's go to childhood favorite films, or ones that are more lighthearted. Let's go back to just entertainment.
We may need to save we may need to save the childhood entertainment for a little bit. So we may just want to start kind of wrapping up this conversation and just say
so let's
of
do this.
Featured length, quote unquote, adult films, like more mature films.
Of the things that you have watched over the past 3-4 months.
Okay.
What are your top 1, 2, 3 favorites? And then I'll give mine.
Oh. I haven't really watched a whole lot of movies, though.
I can give mine.
TV shows.
I'll go first, then. I can give mine. One is on Amazon Prime. There's an Amazon Prime original, which is called Life Itself. Fantastic film. You should watch it.
Okay.
Both really sad and really good.
Okay.
So that's my number 1. Number 2 is, if you ever watch Miss Congeniality, the director for that made another film called Little Italy, which is in that same genre of romantic comedy, which is also pretty decent.
That's fun.
Then third is, I watched Captain America: The Winter Soldier and The First Avenger, actually, by myself again, which is... The Winter Soldier I've seen multiple times, but it was only my second time seeing The First Avenger, and I will forever love Captain America. So...
Okay, so
love him with me.
So I'm surprised because you gave us 3 or 4 months, and within that window, we both would have watched Ford versus Ferrari.
Did we?
Yes.
Okay,
so
I was thinking
things
that I watched myself. Okay, as for family things that we watched as a family, oh my gosh, Ford versus Ferrari. One of my top favorite films of all, and I'm begging my dad to get one of his police friends or a connection of some sort who has a fast car to just take me on a ride along, because I cannot tell you how much that film made me want to learn how to drive stick, only for the sake of also driving fast, which I want to do that anyway.
I love how you just immediately assume that a police car is going to be driving stick.
No. I'm saying the film made me want to drive stick because of how cool that was, and the shifting of gears, and it was, oh my gosh, I loved it.
Hilarious.
But I also just want to drive fast and have someone drive me fast, like really, really fast.
Okay, so yes, this is why I brought that up. I think
I'm sure no one can tell that I loved that film.
Right? Wow. No, absolutely not.
No one can hear the excitement in my voice.
I think, since you got to do 4, I'm going to do 4. I think my top one right now is Knives Out.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's on Amazon Prime.
I know, but I don't want to watch it without people. Oh. I keep telling you all that we need to get a movie night together.
It's so good. We have to watch it with Jackson, too. It's so good. I love it. I love it so much. We have to see it. I watched a film called Breathe that has Claire Foy and Andrew Garfield in it. It's very similar to The Theory of Everything with what happens to Andrew Garfield's character. So, of course, it ends incredibly sad. So, it's very good. I love it. It's very sad, but so sweet. And then I'm going to put We Were Soldiers on there because I did. I really enjoyed that. Okay, I'm going to take that back. It was a very good movie. I don't know if I would watch it again. At least not for a very long time.
I would definitely have to be in the mood to watch it. I was not in the mood to watch it that night.
The entire time and almost the entire next day, my stomach would not stop being in knots. Like, it was... I thankfully managed to sleep. I don't know how, but it was... Of all of the war movies I have seen, that one was the hardest to watch. I don't know why. And it's weird because I had that same experience with Hacksaw Ridge, where the first time I watched it, it was horrible. The second time I watched it, I thought this may be slightly better because I know what's happening.
Caleb was telling me about We Were Soldiers is that was his
worse.
That was his like fifth or whatever time watching the film, and so he said that he knew what to expect, so he wasn't as impacted by the violence that was happening in the film. Which again, we could have a whole conversation on desensitization.
Yeah. It's weird though because again, I think Hacksaw Ridge is the only one I've seen. I've seen War Horse multiple times, but again, that one's different.
I'm just going to chalk it down to also the fact that I haven't watched a war film in a while.
Probably.
And I was so not in the mood to watch one when we started watching it.
Yeah. We went from watching a musical to that.
Yeah.
So, drastic change.
Great idea.
So, at the end of the day, it was a very good film. It's a war film, obviously. Fourth, I think I would put Ford versus Ferrari on there too, just as it was a really good movie, and it was very good.
It was
fantastic. It's not one of my favorites, but it definitely goes up there in like a very good family movie that I will watch all the time.
All the time. Every time. Every day. Everywhere.
There you go.
Perfect. It was beautiful. Okay, so now we've been recording for a very long time. Do we want to close off with a fun quiz entertainment, or do we just want to call it quits right now and give our listeners some peace from the conversation?
We'll call it quits. So if you all want, we'd love to, when we post this episode, and you all can go to Instagram, leave us comments on what your favorite movies are, your favorite TV shows, what you've been watching and loving. We'd love to know that.
Recommendations
exactly
too would be great.
Recommendations.
Hopefully you kind of got an idea of what I like, what Grace likes, what we mutually like, and so we are totally open to any other movies, TV shows that you all have in your back pockets that you could pull out for us to talk about and watch, and then we'll do another podcast on what we've been watching. So go to our Instagram. Again, it's @time2talk. And also, please, if you would, subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review. It really helps our podcast to get out there to more ears and helps us just find more people to engage with.
Exactly.
And
if you like this, share it with a friend.
Exactly. And talk about it and have fun. Create your own podcast, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
Just have good conversations. That's all we want. That's pretty much the only reason why we started this, is to have conversations ourselves and also to instigate some conversations as well with other people and between other people. So yeah, leave us a review, leave us a rating, go follow us on Instagram, and until next time,
Cue the cool music.